Hey there, drone fans. Rick here again from Drone Valley. Welcome back to part 3 of our new Fliers guide. And in today's installment, we're going to discuss just how important it is to know your limits as a pilot. Because with any new skill set you're developing that's worth anything, it's going to take practice. And I don't care if you're learning to hit a golf ball down the center of a fairway, or you're fishing a brand new lake you've never been to before, I promise you, the more you swing that club and the more times that hook hits water, the better you're going to get at it. And flying a quad's no different. It's going to take time. It's going to take patience. I promise you're going to get better at it. All of us, myself included, are getting better every time we fly. There are things I can do today I couldn't do a month ago, and you're going to get to that point. But that's really only the basis of it. So getting good at flying the quad in one situation may not translate to another situation. And I'll give you an example. A lot of my friends learn to fly quads in the house, which is where I recommend you start. Start with something small, something simple. Learn to fly it in a spare room in the house or take it down the basement. Fly it around a little bit. Get good at hovering and moving and landing and taking off. The big step after that is going outside, because that's a big step, because now you've got all kinds of distractions outside. You've got wind, you may have other conditions out there to contend with, you've got people around you. All those things are different than flying alone in the house. So you've got to move outside and get good at flying outside. Once you're good flying outside close to you, the next step may be to fly a little further away. And when you get good flying further away, now it involves all kinds of telemetry information on the controllers. If you've got a more sophisticated quad, to know which direction is the quad pointing, can I really get it back? Because that's really important. So you're going to develop a skill for flying outside. Then you may want to take the next step and fly high, or maybe fly over water, or fly in a bigger area and try and get some great footage and stuff. All those different skill sets take time to master, and it's going to be a stepped process to get there. But more than just mastering the fact that you can fly the quad is having good judgment to know what you're capable of. Because the one problem you're going to have, and I see pilots do this all the time, is when they exceed their capabilities. They don't know what their limits are, and that's when bad things can happen. That's when crashes happen, that's when quads fly away, that's when property damage happens. So pretty much every time I've ever talked to a pilot that's had a crash, when we really get down to it and we're honest with each other, they've exceeded their limits. They tried to do something that they never did before they were ready to do it. And really it comes down to judgment, because only you are going to know, are you ready to do that or not? I can't tell you if you're ready. And I fly with a lot of different pilots and they say, hey, look at me flying here. What do you think? Can I go down the end of the field? I'm like, that's totally your call, because you're the pilot. You're the only person that really knows, are you ready to take that next step in flying? So I guess what I'm getting at is practice gets you there. But that judgment of knowing, can I really do this, or should I really do this, maybe takes a little bit more time. You've got to think about that, and you've got to really be mindful of the fact that maybe you're not ready for that next step, and there's no embarrassment in that. All of us take time to get better at certain skill sets, and it took me a long time, and I'm being totally honest, to feel comfortable flying over water. And I love flying over water. I love being down at the bay or the ocean, putting the quad out and looking back at myself on the shore flying this quad. That's kind of a scary thing, to put a quad over water, because you're thinking, if that comes down, that's gone for good. It took me a long time to get there, but now I'm totally fine flying over water. But that's me. It's going to take you time to do that as well. The third part I'll talk about, and this is something a lot of people don't think through, is the attitude. Because if you study for the commercial exam, in there they talk an awful lot about a pilot's attitude. And pilots in general, the physique of a pilot, or the mentality of a pilot, is not to rush into anything. They like to take their time, make sure they've done their pre-flight checks, make sure the weather's good, make sure they've got good communications with their technology, and they're comfortable taking the mission on that they're going to fly. The worst thing you can do, well, there's a couple of different things. One is you can exceed your limits and you're going to crash. You're going to have issues, the quad's going to come down, and then bad things could happen. If you don't take the time to assess the situation, and that's the judgment part, you could put yourself in a really dangerous situation. So where that typically happens is, maybe you're getting comfortable flying the quad, and then all of a sudden there's a beautiful sunset and you're rushing to get up because you've got to get that sunset on film. You want to take a minute and pause and think about it and say, am I ready to fly? Is the battery charged? Have I really made the connection? Do I know if there are obstacles in the area? Because rushing in, having bad judgment and rushing in can only add badly for you. And that happens a lot where maybe you're pressured into a situation. Friends want to see the quad fly and you know it's too windy to put it up, but you're thinking, oh, I'll give it a shot. That's when the crashes happen. So that limit, knowing your limit, again, is a very personal thing. And I trust you, trust me, it's going to get much more expansive over time. You're going to feel very, very comfortable flying in the house, taking it out in the backyard, taking it to the end of a football field, putting it up 400 feet, flying to the edge of the lake, as long as you've got visual line of sight. All those things are sort of baby steps you've got to get to, but just take your time, because the whole point we're flying, the whole reason we put these quads up in the air, is to enjoy the hobby, to enjoy that liberated feeling of having something, a robot flying in the sky, taking beautiful pictures below it. one thing that can happen to you that will turn that all to bad is having a crash. Having something happen where you feel like, I really wasn't ready for that and I've crashed the quad, that can turn you off to the hobby completely. So I'm trying to help you avoid that by just having a real clear understanding of your limits. So I always sound like I'm preaching in these things, and I don't mean to be, but I've flown for a lot of years and I've flown with hundreds of pilots. The best advice I can give you is develop your stick skills, so get good at the technology. Develop your judgment, know if you're able to do that or not. And then third, try and adapt that mindfulness, for lack of a better word, of a pilot to say, before I put the quad up, let me take a deep breath. Do I have a charged battery? Have I done my pre-flight checklist? Are the props in good shape? Is the battery fully seated? Is the wind kicking up? Do I really know the area I'm in? So do all that stuff, because not to make it laborsome, but having that out of the way, you're going to have a lot more fun flying, and the quad's going to go up. It's going to do what you want it to do. It's going to come back and land. And we're all going to be happier because of it, because there'll be less noise in the news about some knucklehead did something goofy with a quad. And I can guarantee you, every time I read those reports, they weren't skilled, they had bad judgment, and they weren't thinking like a pilot. So from me to you, just keep those things in mind. In the next section, I'll talk a little bit about how you get better with your skill sets. Then I'll come back at the end and tease you a little bit with what we're going to talk about in the fourth part of this series. In this section, we'll discuss just how important it is to know your limits as a pilot. Because the minute you put one of these quads aloft and you've got your thumbs on the joystick, you're officially the pilot in control, which means whatever happens with this craft after the point of takeoff until it comes back and lands is totally your responsibility. And there's no such thing as the wind caught it and it flew out of control and it wasn't my fault. It's always your fault. So you want to make sure you understand how to fly it correctly, and you know your limits, because when you exceed your limits as a pilot, that's when you can get in a whole lot of trouble. So I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, but it's important to keep the mindfulness of the fact that when that quad lifts off, you have to have a laser focus of what that quad's doing, where it's positioned, and how you get it back to land it safely. And once you become a better pilot, that'll be second nature to you. And practice is the way you get there. I mean, all of us are becoming better pilots. I've been flying for years, but I promise you, every time I put a quad up and fly for 30 minutes, I become just a little bit better a pilot, because I understand the quad a little more, I understand how it reacts to wind, I understand the telemetry information on the controller a little better. So we're all getting better every day. You're starting at a really early point, trying to uncover what's cool about the hobby. You're going to get better, and you're going to be a great pilot in no time, but it does take practice. So my first suggestion would be, if you're entering the hobby and you haven't flown before, start with something small and inexpensive. Buy a quad, $100 or less. The nice part there is it's inexpensive. The second part about that is that you can fly it in the house. So if you have crummy weather, it's raining or snowing, you can put this thing up in the house. You can go to the basement and fly. You can find an empty room and just fly this guy. Just have a lot of fun putting it up. And you'll find in very short order that you'll get really good at hovering and moving around and landing. And if you want a challenge, put a coaster down and try and land it on the coaster. Try and fly under a table. In a very short amount of time, you'll be a great pilot with these smaller quads. And the best part is, the stick skills you develop here will translate perfectly to a larger quad when you decide to upgrade to something that you can fly a little bit further and maybe a little bit faster. Now, these guys have a challenge outside. You have to be careful that if they're small and you've got a windy day, you don't want to be flying it outside, because they become slaves to the wind. So you may put it up and be a great pilot, and the wind takes it and it takes off to the side of the yard. But, you know, if it's not a windy day, you can take them outside and fly. But once you get good in these, then you can move up to something a little bit more sophisticated. And honestly, these are trickier to fly than a lot of the more sophisticated quads, because quads like this have stabilization technology built into them that if you raise them up to 30 feet, take your thumbs off the joystick, it'll stay exactly where you had it in 3D space, whereas these guys tend to drift, and you've got to correct for that stuff. So get good on these. It'll make flying these a whole lot easier. All right, having said that, when you start flying outside, find a place that's wide open and clear. Now, I'm lucky that I live around a lot of farmers. I'm friends with them, so they let me fly in their fields. I look for a field that's wide open without any obstructions on the ground. And typically, if I can find a field with trees on either side and the back, that's even better, because that acts as sort of a fence, if you will, or a barrier that if I'm flying a new quad and then it goes out of control and it'll hit the edge of the field and hit that tree and come down, it won't fly over the horizon where I've got to worry about, oh my gosh, what happened with that quad. So try and find a field that's got natural barriers built into it. Then my recommendation would be, before you start flying like crazy, put down something on the ground. If you want to buy a landing mat, that's great, or just a piece of carpeting or cardboard, whatever, as sort of the landing zone. Put your quad on that and practice takeoff and landing, because those two skills, I think, are basic for any pilot. You've got to be really good at taking off and landing in a particular area, because taking off is fun, but when the flight ends and you come back, landing on that mat is really, really fun. It's a challenge, and it's something you should get good at. Now, I know there's a lot of people that watch this clip that are thinking, I'll just hand launch and hand catch. That seems easier to me. And that's probably something you can work on when you become a better pilot. But if you're a new pilot, I always recommend learning how to take off and land from a particular location, because to me, again, that's a basic skill every pilot should have. Once you get comfortable taking off, I'd say stay under 10 feet. Don't fly up to 100 feet, even though you can, because the wind conditions are different up there and the wind may take it a different way. Take it up to 10 or 15 feet, land it again. Take it up, land it. Get practiced on all the basic moves of getting it up to 10 feet, 15 feet, maybe doing a little move around like this first, maybe take it out 10 feet, come back and land it again. When you get comfortable with that, put a garbage can in the field, or maybe a pylon or something like that, and learn to fly around it. Learn to navigate around it and keep a nice circle. If you want to get really good, try and maintain a focus on that particular object as you're flying around it, so you're spinning. It's actually two joystick movements at the same time. You're spinning and keeping a point of interest on that. Now, a lot of the more sophisticated quads will do that at a push of a button, but you developing that skill means you can always do it. And even though I sometimes use that automated feature to do that for me when I'm filming because I'm in a hurry or I've got a really tricky shot to get because the sun is going down and I want to do it automatically, I'd rather do it manually because I have a lot more control about the elevation of the quad and exactly how that positioning is done against that object. So learn how to do that. Now, once you get comfortable with that, then you can start flying further. And that may happen in an afternoon. You may feel you're out in the field flying for a couple of hours and you feel pretty good about it. Take it downfield a little bit, but understand the further you fly away from where you're standing, the more difficult it is to maintain control of that quad, at least cerebrally, right? Trying to keep track of it in your head of like, okay, it's downfield 1,000 feet. Now I can't really see it. Am I facing away or am I facing back? So if I have to fly it back home and land it, do I really know which position that quad is in? So that's where the telemetry information on a lot of the sophisticated quads come into play. And that's why you've got to get good at reading all the metrics that are there on your controller. So in the DJI products, you've got a little radar screen down the bottom that shows you the direction the quad's pointing. It shows you the home point of where it took off. It also shows you elevation, both vertically and horizontally, how far it's away from you, how high it is up in the air. And when you fly that far out where you're not close enough to see the actual front of the quad, it's important to understand how that metric can help you get the quad back. So again, I'd fly out maybe 30 feet or 50 feet. Make sure you can spin it around using these controls and fly back and land. All these skills take time to master, but I promise you, you're going to have a ball out there learning how to do this stuff. And the better you get at it, the more fun it's going to be to fly, because the worst thing that can happen to you is to take a quad, go out to fly for an afternoon, put it up, have it do something you don't expect, fly off, and then you're always going to be afraid that the quad's going to fly away on you before. I've been flying for a lot of years. I have never had a flyaway. Not one single flyaway. In hundreds and hundreds of takeoffs and landings, I've never had a flyaway. A lot of people have had flyaways. I'm sure there were reasons for all those flyaways, maybe technical failure of the product, maybe they were too close to transmission wires. I can't really speak to that, but I can tell you that you can trust the technology. More often than not, when I have people that I talk to about flyaways, it usually comes back to pilot error. They were trying to do something they'd never done before, and they're going to blame it on the quad because it's embarrassing to admit that maybe as a pilot you weren't ready to take on that particular mission. So those are the basic skills to get you better at it. But again, I can't stress this enough. For your own personal sanity and your own personal responsibility, learn what your limits are as a pilot, and there's nothing to be embarrassed about of starting small and working your way up slowly. It's going to make the hobby a whole lot more fun. It's going to be much more fulfilling for you, and then you can teach others how to fly as well, which is the section I'm going to get to next, about talking about how you're a pioneer, because this is an incredibly cool hobby, and you can tell I'm excited about it. I've been flying for years, and every Saturday morning where I've got a sunny day out there and I've got my batteries charged, I can't wait to get outside and put my quads aloft and just have a lot of fun out there in the field. You're going to feel exactly the same way, but take your time and learn how to fly properly, and you'll know what your limits are as a pilot. Okay, that's it for this installment, and I promise you, knowing your limits as a pilot is going to make things a lot more fun and make you a safer flyer. And that involves three things: getting better at flying the quad, having the judgment to know when you're ready for that next step, and then finally developing the attitude of a pilot to not rush into anything and really take in all your circumstances before you put the quad up in the air, because at the end of the day, we just want to have fun. We want the thing to go out and come back and land. And I don't want to sound preachy when I put these clips together. I'm just a guy who flies, right? And I know a lot of you are watching these clips because you're new to the hobby or you're thinking of getting into the hobby. I want to tell you that we're here to welcome you into this hobby. It's a very embracing group, and we like new pilots coming in, and I'm trying to give you all the basics I can from the experience that I've gained over the years flying quads to sort of make that transition easier for you guys. And knowing what your limits are doesn't mean you have to stop at a particular point. You can if you want. Maybe you only want to fly in the house, or maybe you want to fly in your backyard. You never want to put it up really high or fly over a lake, and that's totally fine. Whatever makes you happy is fine. But if you want to push that next step, It's not unusual to have butterflies. The first time I flew over a lake, I was nervous. I was really nervous, and I went really a little bit over the edge and then came back and then flew out a little further. So developing that skill set of knowing what your limits are and pushing those limits gently is something you're going to have a lot of fun doing. So I hope that works out well for you. Anyway, that's pretty much it for today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I say every time, hit that subscribe button because I've got a bunch more content coming. Hopefully you're finding this information helpful. If you have any questions about anything I've covered today, drop those in the comments below and I promise to get back to you as quickly as I can. I have a lot of fun putting these together and I really hope these are hitting home with you guys and you're enjoying them. So let me know if they are and I'll continue to push these out for you. But until next time, thanks for watching, and happy flying.